featuring Dr. Oybek Rostomov, fertility specialist practicing in Adora Fertility, Brisbane. Now, again, we're back this afternoon as Dr. Oybek will be telling us more about randomized controlled trials in IVF and sample size calculation. This live stream is being broadcasted for everybody's information across LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and other social media platforms. And those who are watching right now can also simply message us or send it via rostomov.com.au or simply send us a direct message to our official Facebook page. To go through it accordingly with us is our fertility specialist from Adora Fertility Brisbane, Dr. Oybek Rostomov. Good afternoon once again, Doc.
Good afternoon, Jesse. Thanks for introduction. Thanks everyone for watching this live stream. Today we are going to discuss sample size calculation for randomized controlled trials in IVF. The reason we wanted to cover this as a part of IVF Journal Club is that after reviewing 3 papers on fresh versus frozen embryo transfer, we actually realized is that sample size calculation is one of the major problems in conducting randomized controlled trials and also interpretation of the outcomes of those trials. So that's why we just wanted to bring everyone's attention, readers' attention into this the problem of these sample size calculations for RCT, which actually defines whether actually this the research paper is usable or not. So randomized controlled trials are built upon the foundation of sample size calculation, so which has got 3 pillars: effect size, significance level, and power of the study. So let us consider one by one. So the treatment effect size. So by effect size, we mean by compared to the control group, once we introduce new treatment in a study on randomized control trial, how much of improvement in outcome we are expecting. Usually the primary outcome in IVF studies is live birth or live birth rate. So compared to the baseline for the unit or control group, how much of improvement in absolute terms we're expecting. For example, if I work in the clinic, which has got success rate of 35% in certain age group, then if I introduce new treatment compared to the existing treatment, then how much of improvement I'm expecting to see 35 to 40% or 35 to 45%. Okay, so that is if the difference between the 2 treatment is small, more patients will be required to detect the difference. That's a very important point. So if you put a realistic smaller increase after the treatment, then we need more participants in our study. So the second is a significance level we call alpha. So this is the probability of type 1 error. So type 1 error means finding a difference when difference does not exist. For example, we do the study, if our significance level is too poor, then we find treatment effect when actually the treatment effect doesn't exist. For example, if we put significance level in very minimal terms, so then we should be expecting that we will find some treatment effects which doesn't actually exist. For example, so you can in RCTs you use 2 different type of treatment effects: 5% or 1%. So minimum should be 5%, which means here we can read that which means indicating 5% chance that significant difference actually due to chance. It's not true difference. So we accept 1 in 20 chance of finding difference when difference does not exist. That's not great, but that's kind of acceptable. Scientific research cannot guarantee 100% accuracy, but we accept that we can make a mistake in 5% of the cases if you put the significance level to 5%. So this is second one is a power of the studies, which is very important. So this is a probability of type 2 error, which means not detecting a difference when one actually exists. If our power is very small, then we may not find the difference between the groups when actually there is a difference. For example, we did fresh versus frozen. There may be like 2% improvement after frozen, but because we are so underpowered, we will not see that. So beta is directly related to study power. So most medical literature uses beta cutoff of 20% or 80% power, indicating 20% chance that significant difference is missed. So 90% is better, which means there will be 10% chance significant difference is missed. Okay, so that's good. So we have got three things: power, effect size, power, and significance. Okay, as a scientist or researchers, how do we decide what is the right effect size, what's the right power, what's the right significance level for our RCT? So pretty much it is based on assumptions. So assumptions on that certain new treatment will increase effect size by so much, and so we need, then we arbitrarily set significance level and power. So where do we get these assumptions from? Is that we get these assumptions from past research papers. Usually we look at another research paper, be it observational research or randomized controlled trial, and that author say, oh, we use like 80% power, 5% significance level, and we assume this treatment will make 10%, 20% difference or 10% difference, and we just pretty much take it from there and justify that this should be our basis for sample size calculation. Then you may ask, where did actually that previous research group got this assumption? Is usually often they got from the previous uh, papers. So essentially, there's infinite loop of assumptions based on assumptions based on assumptions. So we have to be very careful as a reader. Of course, we cannot control, research studies. As a reader, we can actually control of our understanding. When we actually reading our methods, we should, first thing we have to look what was assumptions of this research group when we are calculating sample of randomized controlled trial they conducted. So assumptions are very important. Then you should actually ask, is it going to be my assumption? Do I actually believe that this assumption is correct in my clinical practice? So, okay, so now let us examine what is the effect of these assumptions on actual the sample size calculation, and actual, of course, the quality of the research study, and of course, when this research study evidence applied to the clinical practice, what will be the impact of this to in real life condition in real patients? Okay, so assumption number one. So let us say scientists as researchers assume their new treatment will increase live birth rate from 30% to 40%. So in absolute terms, they said, okay, if you do if you introduce new treatment, our success rate will go up by 10% in absolute terms, from 30 to 40%. So let us examine what will be the impact of this assumption, just simple one assumption, to the power of the study, or how many patients we actually need for this particular randomized controlled trial. So we made this assumption, we increased 30 to 40%. If you set the power to 80%, which is bare minimum, and significance level to 0.05, then we need 712 patients in total, 356 on each arm. This is a bare minimum we can get away with. So then we decided, okay, no, actually we will increase the power to 90% and keep the significance level to 0.05%. Then we need 952 patients in total. Then one of the researchers in the group said, no, we actually want much better significance and power. We want this we can do. Then you need 1,350 patients. Okay, so this assumption in treatment effect hasn't changed. It's 10%. But depending on how we set in significance level and power, the number of participants we need in RCT jumped from 700 to 1,300, almost doubled in numbers. Okay, so it seems to be manageable. Getting 1,350 patients also may be manageable for some certain research questions. So, but the question is our assumption is correct? Do we actually believe if there is any intervention in IVF which can increase live birth rate by 10% in absolute terms? Let us examine this assumption. If you look at the historic data of HFA in UK, this is a IVF cycle of maybe millions of IVF cycles conducted during almost 30-year of period in the United Kingdom. It's all IVF in UK is registered with HFA. So we're talking about millions of IVF cycles during the last 28 years, starting from 1991 till 2018. This is 28 years. So during 28 years, advanced healthcare system of United Kingdom managed to increase success rate in IVF by only 17%. In 28 years, 17%. If you divide by year, so we see 0.6% increase per annum of live birth rate. See that one by doing one single research, we wanted to jump 10% for in real clinical practice. It's taking 15 years of hard work to achieve that 10% increase in actual live birth rate. So this is why if you look at this data, it seems to be quite unrealistic. And also, if you take into account during this period of time from 1991 to 2018, this 28-year period, 22,000 research studies were published in IVF, in PubMed. Yeah, so these are cited papers, 22,000 research papers published. And of course, advanced healthcare system as United Kingdom used best of those research evidence and applied to the clinical practice. Still, they managed to get 0.6% increase per annum. So, and remember this, a lot of these 22,000 research papers, maybe thousands of those research papers claim the intervention can increase the success rate by 5% or 10%. In actual real practice, altogether, after application of most analyzed, synthesized, best quality of research, we are seeing only 0.6% increase in actual terms. So if you look at this number, 10% increase in any IVF intervention seems to be very unrealistic. Then you wonder, is it actually assumption or is it aspiration? So I may aspire to make IVF success rate by 100%. It will be my aspiration. There's nothing wrong with that. But if I assume that I can achieve it and base my research methodology on my aspiration, then of course I will get a wrong result, because a true result of the research is a true signal. Doesn't care what actually researcher or scientist is aspiring or assuming. It gives you objective reality if you interpret it correctly and conduct, of course, research correctly. So if we change our assumption to realistic increase by one single intervention to 2%, if you think we have a wonderful intervention, when we apply in IVF, our success goes up by 2% in absolute terms. The assumption changed from 10% to 2%. We said the incidence will increase from 30% to 32%. Now look how many patients do you need in RCT to have properly powered study. Here with significance level set to 0.01 and power to set to 90%, and we need 31,822 patients to achieve high quality research evidence on certain research question, 15,000 for each arm. So it is of course not achievable. We will see from further review that it is maybe possible theoretically. Practically, certainly it's not achievable to conduct RCT and IVF is 31,000 patients. So let us be kind to the scientists. Let us bring it down our assumption to increase the assumption to 5%. We assume that we have found wonderful intervention in IVF, magic intervention, which increases our success by 5%, not 2%, not 10%, 5%. We set our assumptions on RCT in IVF to 5%, which is manageable, slightly realistic term. So we assume this intervention will increase from 30 to 35%. Let us examine what happens in actual numbers you needed for a research study. So here we can see that if we say increase from 30 to 35%, power set to 80%, significance set to 0.05%, it's bare minimum. When we are assuming 5%, bare minimum we need 2,752 patients. 2,752 patients, total patients, bare minimum. Yeah. So then if you say, okay, no, we actually make it even better, more powerful, and we set the power to 90%, not 80%, which means we are happy to make 10% mistake, not 20% mistake. So then our total number of patients will increase to 3,684. But if you want to be very, very prudent, and if you want to be sure that reduce type 1 error to 1%, then which means when we will be 99% sure that the result we got is correct, and so then the total number of patients in RCT should be increased to 5,218 patients in total. So yeah, so that is a situation with sample sizes needed in RCT to achieve realistic, reliable results. Okay, so then you may say, okay, is it a problem? There's like hundreds of thousands of IVF cycles going on in the world. Is it a problem to get 5,000 patients for one RCT? Yes, it is a problem. So we have a massive problem in this area. So which is actually demonstrated by this paper from a Manchester group. So the researchers actually looked through all systematic review of Cochrane systematic reviews of meta-analysis, and which addressed question of live births, which includes fertility in IVF, all randomized controlled trials, pretty much in fertility space and IVF space, included in these systematic reviews, and all the systematic reviews were examined by the group in Manchester. So this is pretty much all the randomized controlled trials conducted in IVF until 2018. So fairly with good confidence we can say that. So then they selected, there was 77 systematic reviews, which reported live births as an outcome. And the group selected 77 most powered randomized controlled in total, which means they selected, out of 77 systematic reviews, they selected the most powered study, one from each systematic review. In each systematic review, we have, of course, tens of different RCTs. From there, they selected one. So they assumed, of course, which is correct assumption, if the highest powered research study is underpowered or well powered, then which means everything else follows that. So, and they found actually, even with a very conservative assumption of 5% increase in live birth rate, with 80% power, actually literally there wasn't any randomized controlled trial which was sufficiently powered. So pretty much we are saying in IVF and fertility today, there isn't any single RCT is sufficiently powered to detect 5% live births in absolute terms with 80% power. We are not putting the power to 90% set. We are not putting significance level to 0.01. We are not even saying realistically we can expect 2% increase. We set very arbitrarily here 5%. Still we don't have any RCT which is sufficiently powered in this field of research. Then you may say, okay, what about meta-analysis? We can pool all of this and have a great power. But again, they found only 2% of meta-analysis, 2%, 98% wasn't sufficiently powered. 2% of meta-analysis was sufficiently powered after pooling all these RCTs in this particular field of research. Yeah, so then, of course, Manchester Group, led by Andy Vail, Steve Roberts, and Jack Wilkinson, have published a number of research papers which specifically looked at the problems and research methodology, not methodology, research conduct and of interpretation, including randomized controlled trials, and the just increased awareness of clinicians and scientists in pitfalls of research in this area. So it all seems to be quite daunting. Seems after so many years of research, now we're sitting in the situation that we have got thousands and thousands of RCTs, which was severely underpowered, probably, you know, pretty much useless, because we say that RCT is built on the foundation of sample size calculation. If sample size calculation is so poor, then conclusions we're getting from RCTs will be unreliable. So, which may seem to be quite depressing, but actually, in fact, I'm very optimistic, because from here only things can improve. Why? Because so far we didn't know that actually we didn't know, which means we were so unaware that our research methodology or practice, let us say practice, was so poor, even we were not aware. We were assuming RCTs we were publishing and reading actually very valid and very reliable. Now, thanks to the work of Manchester Group, mainly, and of course of many more scientists, now we're becoming aware actually there is a massive problem. So awareness will lead us to next step, where we will be very careful when we are designing these research studies and conducting research studies, and as a clinicians we're actually reading these research studies. So that's actually a good thing. So it's all good. Now we have been talking about research part of RCTs, conducting, designing, conducting of research, publishing of research. But what about the clinicians sitting in the trenches and who actually facing this research question in real terms? They're actually looking at the patient and saying, should I use this intervention or other intervention? And of course, RCT is best methodology for analyzing effectiveness and safety of treatment interventions. Then if all RCT is in poor shape, what I'm going to do with that? How actually I'm going to analyze? So by changing the knobs of effect and significance and power up and down, we can get different sample sizes ranging from 700 to 5,218 as an individual clinician, how I can tackle this situation and how I can interpret it. So the first rule is we should not be eluded by the just name of the research methodology. So we hear all the time RCT is highest quality method of research. Yes, as a method, this is the highest quality research method in assessing treatment interventions, but does not necessarily mean that actually the quality of actual research in front of us is of high quality. So name does not equal to quality. Yeah. So the second point is, when we read the research methodology, research paper, we should not just look at the conclusion of the research or just read the abstract. We should actually, first thing, we have to look at the methods of the research paper. So because let us assume that research institution is production line and the research paper is a product. We actually, by reading methods, we're reading product description. So once product description or methods says our assumptions were this, and on the base of that assumption we did the power calculation, which gives us this many participants, they actually, you're writing their disclaimer. Their disclaimer is that we actually telling you what we assume, how we did the power calculation. As a consumer of that research, which is clinician, we should actually read the ingredients and decide whether we're going to consume this information or not. If you think that, oh, this assumption is wrong, I haven't seen any intervention in IVF, which can increase IVF success by 5 to 10%, then we should be very careful in consuming this information or using this information in our clinical practice. So that is my second point. And the third point is even better, that we individually develop skills to critically appraise research papers. So there is very robust programs for that, free online programs, including like CAS, Critical Appraisal Skills Program, which helps us to systematically review research papers and analyze, which helps us to decide which research paper we should actually keep in our library and use for clinical practice, and which research papers we should bin. That's actually even more important skill to have, reading quickly and binning like thousands and thousands and thousands of research papers you come across, so that they will not interfere with your clinical decision making. Yeah, so that's the end of my presentation, JC. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doc, for that detailed presentation with regards, of course, to the sample size calculation for randomized controlled trials in IVF. Now, I have here a couple of questions that I'd like to ask you. The first one is, what is the smallest number of participants in RCT in IVF?
Yes, actually, it is really amusing, actually. So, and that actually paper in Manchester group, and when they actually reviewed systematic reviews, they found a paper which had actually 5 participants in one arm and 7 participants in other arm. Yeah, so 13 participants in total. When we are actually saying having 5,000 participants would be good enough, now we got RCT with 5 and 7 participants in 2 arms. So, so this is why having a skill of binning papers quickly is the most crucial clinical scientific skill any doctor can have today.
All right, thank you so much, Doc. Now, here's another question to ask you right now. Is there any better methodology than RCT in studying effectiveness of, treatments in IVF research?
In terms of studying treatment effectiveness and safety of the treatment, RCT is a gold standard. This is actually the research methodology designed for this particular type of research. And of course, the other type of research can assist, like observational research using large data sets, but they have got their own methodological issues. They have got 2 different problems. So in RCT, as a method, we don't have a problem. There is no methodological flow, but there are practical problems, which means it's so perfect method, it's so difficult to apply in a real life practice. But we have to aspire and have to do our best to apply that method. As a method, this is by far the best. But there are other methods which are practical, which means we can utilize because it's easier to achieve than RCT, but they have got methodological problems. Now we have to counterbalance between a perfect method, imperfect practice, between imperfect method and imperfect method and perfect practice. So there's just 2 things we have to counterbalance to synthesize and analyze answer to any research question as a scientist and as a clinicians. In terms of improving the power of the study, you can use meta-analysis, but in order to meta-analysis, you should have a reliable and valid RCTs in first place. And also individual patient data meta-analysis is another method which can improve our achievement practice in terms of achieving sufficient number of participants. So yes, we cannot go away from RCT. We have to do our best to design proper RCT. Rather than trying to answer 10,000 research questions poorly, we should be able to answer 1 or 2 IVF research questions robustly first and take it from there.
Thank you so much, Doc, for answering those questions. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Dr. Ibeck, for that sample size calculation for randomized controlled trials in IVF. What will they look forward to tomorrow, Doc?
Thanks, JC. We'll be continuing, maybe reviewing fresh versus frozen embryo transfer RCTs.
Mm-hmm.
So objective of this journal club in IVF is looking at the one particular research question in IVF sorting this out and understanding what's the research evidence on RCT, observational studies, and having good grasp on whether we have got reasonable evidence on one practicing this field one way or another. So then we will move on to the next field and next field. We almost finished this research question of you doing fresh versus frozen embryo transfer. After reviewing a couple of more papers, then we'll move on to next important research question.
All right. Thank you so much, Doc. Again, everyone, please go ahead and check out all our social media pages and our website, rostomov.com.au and adorefertility.com.au for more information. See you all again tomorrow for another exciting discussion. And please join us again for another episode of IVF Journal Club or the Fertility live stream with Dr. Oybek Rastomov. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you, Doc.
Thank you. Thanks, Jesse.